I've heard in recent days that I should be thinking more about a $9 million contract for Marchand. And this morning, someone suggested to me it wouldn't be impossible that it gets to 10 million.
Oh
I think that
God. Oh my
now,
God. Okay, wonderful. Let's bring in Chris Johnston, the great, legendary Chris Johnston. There he is. Always love. What's that hat? You've told me before.
I have, yeah. It's a company in Toronto, just a mom and pop shop called North Standard Trading Post. I'm not sponsored by them. I just like their products, so I buy their hats and t-shirts for every little kid I know. A bear t-shirt is a good gift for a little kid.
It's a cute ass hat.
Amazing. It's absolutely adorable. If you are a team that was in on, or that planned on being in on Mitch Marner, would you see all the rumblings and grumblings about Vegas and say, you know what, at this point, let's just move to plan B because we have to assume he's going to Vegas?
There certainly are a few teams in that position. I think the Carolina Hurricanes would love to get in front of Mitch Marner if he hits the open market. The Los Angeles Kings, I think, would like to have an audience with him. And, how else would you read the happenings of the last few days is to think you're probably not going to get that opportunity. But at the same time, until or unless a deal happens involving his rights or sign and trade here before tomorrow at noon, I mean, I think you have to at least kind of keep your mind open to a lot of things. And I think that's really, from a front office perspective, what makes the free agency period so hectic is you have sort of like a plan A, but then you're like, well, if this doesn't happen, then you sort of plan B, plan C, plan D. It would be hard for anyone other than Vegas, I think, to call Marner a plan A right now because, I do believe that there's a lot of smoke there around obviously that situation and the possibility lands with the Golden Knights. But, if it gets to where he's on the open market, maybe someone else can put an offer in front of him he can't refuse.
How real do you think the tampering allegations are? And are the Leafs going to end up with something for Mitch Marner at the end of this?
Well, let's separate the two. I think that they could end up with something for him because there's a lot of value, almost the reverse of the last question. If you're Vegas and you feel good that Mitch Marner, would want to play in your city, but trading for his rights and signing him, there's some value to that. It removes any uncertainty of the open market. It removes any possibility something goes sideways, and you just get it done. And there's still a team that's working with a lot of cap restrictions. So, if they're trading someone off their roster and creating cap space that way, and obviously Nicholas Waugh's name has been attached there, then it's one of those solutions that can maybe meet, offer a little solution for all parties. Tampering itself, we all know everybody in this league talks, and they talk a lot, and agents talk to team people, and there's a lot of sort of conversations that happen that I don't have any doubt at least verge into something like tampering. But the tampering charge is a pretty serious thing, and to prove it, which I don't think has happened in my years around the league, I mean, there'd have to be a paper trail. And so I don't really want to lob that allegation out there. And I want to be careful how I dance around the subject. But what is true is that the Leafs and the Golden Knights have had multiple conversations over the years about a Mitch Marner trade. Mitch Marner had a no movement clause this year. And there was discussions around the trade deadline about potentially a three-way trade that would have saw Mitch Marner go to Vegas. And I believe he was willing to waive his no move clause at that time to have that trade happen. And so even though that didn't happen, largely because Vegas couldn't satisfy the part of the deal that would go to Carolina, basically would have been Rantanen at the time going to Toronto sending Marner to Vegas, but the Vegas to Carolina part of that three-way trade that was discussed never made enough sense that it didn't proceed. But in the process of having those conversations, obviously Marner's agent, Marner himself, the Golden Knights, the Leafs, like everyone knew that there was enough interest that he was willing to go there. So, I don't know what would ever have to emerge for it to be considered tampering. In fact, to be honest, for the last, say, couple of weeks, I kept hearing Marner was looking at a shorter term deal with Vegas or another team on the free agent market. Now it sounds like it could be a longer term contract. So I don't have any reason to believe like a deal itself was like completely cooked up. I don't even think there's a contract right now that's an exact deal that's done for Marner. So, look, there's a lot of shared experience here from everyone at the table. I think there's some emotions. There's a lot of stress this time of year. So I don't know where anything goes with that. I'd be surprised if we're talking about any actual tampering charges. But that doesn't remove the fact that somewhere in the next hour, 2 hours, 10 hours, we could still see a Marner trade because I think teams like to get out in front of things, make those deals. Tampa dealt for Gensel's rights last year with Carolina before signing him. The Leafs actually sent a draft pick and a player to Dallas for Chris Tanev's rights a year ago before signing him. So there is some precedent here in recent memory.
The plight of a reporter is that you do all this work and you find all this information and you share all this information. And ultimately, once the move happens, nobody cares or remembers who said it, who reported it, who knew it. So I want to give you your flowers on Brad Marchand being traded to the Florida Panthers, because you were the only person I remember who was taking the idea of Brad Marchand being traded seriously. And people were losing their minds. The Bruins are never trading him, this, that. You knew something about Marchand then. What do you know about Marchand now? Because we've talked about Utah. We've talked about, obviously, Florida. Boston has come up. Where do you think he goes? Toronto, obviously. And do you have an idea as to what his contract looks like right now?
It feels like it's growing by the day. Like earlier in the spring, and as that Panthers playoff run was going, I was reporting, and others I'm sure were as well, it was going to be an $8 million plus deal. I've heard in recent days that I should be thinking more about a $9 million contract for Marchand. And this morning, someone suggested to me it wouldn't be impossible that it gets to 10 million. I think that.
Oh my
Now,
God.
Now, don't confuse this. I'm not saying 100% he's signing a $10 million contract, but I do think the level of interest is such that he's going to sign the kind of deal that no one would have imagined for him at the start of the season. I mean, look at that playoff run. I know it was a very difficult season, and what a like Brad Marchand. We'll be talking about this years down the road when the trade deadline comes up, and so and so player is being rumored about how you can remake it a difficult season with a great run after a trade like the one he had to Florida. And so he's in a position where he's in high demand. Let's imagine the Marner comes off the board before actual free agency. If Marchand does not sign in Florida in the next basically 24 hours or a little less, I mean, he's the number one player available in free agency, even at age 37, even with all the things you might be worried about. So I think I'm expecting 9 million to be right about where the number comes in for him. I expect it now to be 4 years. Initially, I was thinking it was a 3-year contract. I mean, he's signed the kind of deal. Like, in fact, I should start looking up. Like, I don't know if anyone at his age has signed that kind of contract ever, quite honestly. I mean, usually when a player gets to 37, we're talking about him taking hometown discounts, signing a deal like John Tavares was only 34, almost 35. He just signed a $4 million deal in Toronto to stay there. I mean, that's the kind of deal at that stage of your career we're talking about players signing. But Marchand, it's a perfect storm for him. Cap going up. He just had this amazing run. He couldn't, I agree with you. I've seen some of your clips from your recent shows. Like, he couldn't have handled the spotlight better, the attention on him. Like, he's a machine for marketing himself, and he's still damn good on the ice. So I think he's going to be a big winner. Whether he signs a deal in Florida, it's going to be monster. But if he hits the open market, he's getting a massive contract.
I mean,
Well,
but if
let
he's
me-
getting those numbers you're throwing around, like Toodaloo, Florida, right? Like how could he stay in Florida?
Well, that might be the decision, right? And I'll be very clear here. I don't know as of this morning or early afternoon now where things exactly stand with the Panthers and Marchand. I know they engaged with him over the weekend. They're making a pitch to sign him. Ever since getting Sam Bennett's extension done, he is priority one for the Panthers. And so I'm sure, first of all, they're not going to go to those type of numbers. I can say that confidently. But, they've got a pretty strong pull. They can sell him on, hey, bud, like, look how well this fits. Look how much fun you're having. We all saw the party vids. Like, he's clearly one of the guys there. And they can say to him pretty credibly, hey, you got a chance to win one more, two more, multiple more Stanley Cups if you stay here and sign here. And so the decision is jumping into the unknown to some degree, especially if he signs, say, in a Toronto or a Utah, somewhere he's never played. Even on that kind of contract, I mean, it's great for your accountant. It's great for your kids' futures. But, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And I know Brad can handle pressure. Obviously, he's had a Hall of Fame type career to this stage, but it's nice that the day you get the money, but then there's a lot that comes with it. So, I'm sure that he's weighing through all those factors, and I don't know where at this second it sits. But you're right. I think it's going to be hard for him to pass up on that, especially because the timing and hindsight of the big deal he signed in Boston, signed that extension during the 2016 World Cup of Hockey. Like his best seasons came after he signed that 8-year deal. So he's probably left a little bit of money on the table in his career. And it looks to me like he's going to recoup some of those lost funds here with this next contract.
So I've been surprised at the Bruins kind of reemerging in those. I figured he was good as gone because of the price going up. Like if they weren't willing to meet him at his price before, why are they now being linked back to Marchand? And like, what would be their sales pitch to Marchand to get him to come back here after, like you said, he went to Florida, he like experienced this revitalization, won a Stanley Cup, and is having like his value completely lifted up by what he's done in Florida. Why would he come back to Boston? Like, are you surprised that the Bruins are in this mix?
Yeah, and I don't know to what degree they're in it, to be honest. I mean, I think that they want to leave the door open if he wants to do that. But, I don't know your guys' dating history. Usually it doesn't work well when you're reuniting with an ex. Like typically speaking, that's not it's hard to find the old magic again. And so, I'm sure on a personal level, like his family was obviously a huge part of the community there in Boston. But, I have a hard time personally believing that that's going to be what makes the most sense for him. But, I guess if you're the Bruins, like why close the door now? But yeah, you've just, you have this breakup. It was emotional at the time, right? I mean, Marchand didn't want to leave. He's been pretty open about that and was trying to do everything at the time, before March 7th to stay, and it didn't work. Like, then he has the ultimate glow up. I mean, getting back with your ex, I mean, just doesn't
Yeah,
make
like,
a lot of sense to me. So
he got way
I think
hotter, they got way uglier. Like it makes no sense.
Right.
I have a theory on this. I think the Bruins saw Brad Marchand go off, do great. Everyone's saying, how did you trade that guy? Especially when he was going to give you a hometown discount and he was going to stay there for cheap. And there's all this egg on Don Sweeney's face. We all know, unless he stays in Florida, that he is going to go get top dollar. I think the Bruins just want to put themselves on that list. So when he goes out and gets top dollar, they save face and say, well, you know what? He was just all about the money in the end. And I think that it would take a certain type of idiot fan to buy what they'd be selling there. But I think that this is just more PR than anything else.
Right. I'm a little less sure than you, but what you say there makes some sense. And honestly, I feel like with this situation, I mean, maybe the breakup had to happen to get that out of Marchand too, right? Like let's not. I mean, we get to only view. I guess we don't know what doors don't open, right? It's we're always guessing about what could have been, but maybe had he stayed in Boston and seen a bunch of those players, his buddies traded away the way they did at the deadline, because I think even had he extended there, it doesn't change the fact that Carlo and Coyle and everyone else that got shipped out at that time, like that was the path the organization was going down. And so yes, he had a chance to sort of, I guess, carry the legacy of all the way back to 2011, but even the more recent teams help Pasternak and McAvoy make that transition with a younger team around them. But I don't know. I actually believe that it's been good for both parties here, probably, to get some space. I know that there's sentimentalists, and I'm sure there's lots of hardcore Bruins fans that hated seeing him in another jersey, and probably hated seeing how well he did in another jersey. But this can be, sometimes change can be helpful too. I think both for the organization and for the player, and that's why I don't see a reunion unless that's something that really deep down Marchand wants, and I don't know why that would be the case.
Oh yeah, to your point, they saved him from himself, and that's another place where Don Sweeney deserves some credit because he made hockey a better place by not letting Brad Marchand stay and us not get to see this run that he went on. Oilers fans hearing that hate me for saying that. Where does Brock Besser
Well, just
go?
a quick thought. Just a quick thought before. Like, would Sidney Crosby been better at some point to have moved on, or like he's just, he's still a really great player on a rusting hulk of a team. Like it sometimes it's good. You're right. I feel like that's what I think of. I know anyway, maybe the Halifax connection has my brain going, but
No,
I think a lot
like,
of people out there would like to see Crosby move on.
Penguins fans don't want to hear it, but like 31 other fan bases would be blessed to see Sidney Crosby play playoff hockey in like the next few years. And it's probably not going to happen in Pittsburgh. And so I think most fan bases are probably rooting to see Sidney Crosby go somewhere else.
And it could have been him having a Conn Smythe kind of spring if he had got traded at the deadline somewhere, right? I mean, he could have been having a story like Marchand authored. And so, I guess the grass sometimes isn't greener, but I think other times it actually is. Anyway, Brock Besser, you're asking about where's he going? I think everybody wants him that isn't every team that's looking to get better, which seems like everyone in the league right now, needs a player like a Brock Besser or a Nikolai Ehlers. Like they're kind of they're in the next tier, right below the Marner Marchand conversations. Or we'll leave those to the side. But you know, the Winnipeg Jets are likely losing Ehlers. I'm sure they'd love a crack at Brock Besser. Even the Vancouver Canucks haven't totally closed the door on a Besser reunion. Again, another one I can't really see happening at this point. But those will be two intriguing players for me on July 1st because I think both are going to hit the open market. I think both are going to have a lot of different types of options. My sense is Besser is open to all kinds of different situations. Like he hasn't, the problem with free agency, sometimes the top free agents are like, yeah, Mitch Marner is technically a free agent, but he wants to go somewhere where he can win. He wants to go somewhere where, the tax situation is good. Like, he's really, his list is pretty small. Whereas I think Besser is willing to look at it and consider a lot of different cities and opportunities, teams at various stages of competitiveness, depending on the contract and the circumstances. So, I don't know where he's going, but I do think he's a true free agent and that a whole bunch of different teams will be in on him and have a plausible shot to convince him to come sign for them.
Over the past couple of days, there's been reports coming out that the Canucks are going to re-sign Thatcher Demko most likely. What is that contract going to look like? And like, what's the state of the goalie market right now? Because Jake Allen is the best free agent goalie available. We saw John Gibson traded already. So like, say there's a team out there that may have like hypothetically finished runner-up in the Stanley Cup final. Like, what are their options for goaltending?
They're not good, right? I mean, they made the decision, they being the Oilers, that John Gibson wasn't something they wanted, excuse me, to pursue during the regular season. The acquisition cost at that time they felt was too high in a trade. He would have played there, even though he did have some no trade protection. He was willing to go to Edmonton, and they just didn't see it as a big enough upgrade or worth the price. I don't know where they turned out, quite honestly. I mean, Jake Allen is the only goaltender that I think you could sign as a free agent in theory. I mean, he's still in discussions actually the New Jersey Devils right now. So suppose there's a world where even that door closes before it could even open to other teams. But he's the only goaltender with a real past of high level performance over a sustainable period of time where you could probably sign him and expect him to play a bunch of games for you. I mean, there's a lot of other goalies that have had their moments on the UFA board, but most of them are clear number twos at best. We just saw Billy Husso sign a deal over the weekend in Anaheim for $2.2 million. He's their number 3 guy right now. The goaltending market is in shambles. Like if you don't have your goaltending secured at this point, I think you can't be too comfortable. And so, Edmonton to me is probably going to have to address that issue if you think it's an issue by a trade at some point after July 1st. I don't see an obvious or apparent solution for them. In fact, I think that's why you're starting to hear people say, well, look, they might not make a change at all because, the one thing you can say they have in Calvin Pickard and Stu Skinner is they have a very affordable tandem. They have a tandem that's taken them to 2 straight Stanley Cup finals. I know they didn't win either of them, but, they've won a lot of games with those guys. And I just don't see a lot of obvious ways for them to get better. Maybe something will emerge next season too. I mean, we'll see how that develops, but there's not like one guy to say, hey, they'll go and chase him and that'll solve the problem. I don't think it's that easy.
The problem is, and Stan Bowman said in his breakup day availability that, we've had the better goaltending in every round except the final. And Pete, that'll drive people crazy. I'll say the last 2 years, they've had the better goaltending in every round except for this Stanley Cup final. So when he doesn't want a John Gibson during the year because it's going to cost a lot to get him, you don't know if he'll be healthy. And with so many of these guys, he thinks, I'm speaking for him, but I assume he thinks, do we even know that at his best, he's going to be better than Skinner at his best? And he would not be wrong to think that. But I think we all know something's got to change. They've got to find somebody more consistent. So I actually see his dilemma where he's like, am I really going to pay for something that might not be as good as what I already have, even if it's a little more consistent? Like, do you see that dilemma making sense for why he hasn't gone out and spent yet?
Yeah, I totally see it. The problem for me is, though, it's 2 years in a row now where you've lost to the same team. And honestly, the Oilers feel like they lost ground to the Panthers between those, that like in the span of from June 2024 to June 2025, that the distance between them and the best team in the league actually grew. And so how do you go back to your team that you're trying to convince, hey, we're going to be better, we're going to be better equipped to handle this, like we can do this again, and not address that position? I think, it sounds like they're going to make a change with the goaltending coach there, but I don't know if that's enough. I feel like, as much as it pains me to say this, because it's probably the easy thing for a media person to say and the hardest thing for a GM to do, is that sometimes you do need change for change's sake. I know that they're going to say you don't do that, but I think you need to come back and instill belief in your team. That frankly, that's why a lot of teams make moves at the trade deadline. It's like it's almost a public show of, we believe in you guys. We think this group has what it takes. We're adding to this team to give you a shot. I think that they have to do something, but I understand fully why they haven't. Because as I say, like it's going to get more expensive for them. They have significant cap issues to consider. They haven't signed Evan Bouchard as of the second, but obviously a big contract's coming down the pipe for him. They're losing some players. Connor Brown's going to hit free agency here. John Klingberg. They need to replace guys, but they don't have money to spend, and so they're in a real predicament. I mean, the best thing you can say about the Oilers is they have the two best players in the world, or two of the absolute best players in the world. But beyond that, it's difficult to see how they get better. And I really do think they're going to have to make some kind of change. But I mean, I don't see what it is right now. I mean, do you trust Elvis Merzlikins? Like where else do you find? You're going to have to find someone who can maybe have his best showing for your team, because there's just not a proven fail-safe for sure commodity out there for them to go get.
You are not wrong about that. The day after the Oilers lost the cup this year, I was like, my number one takeaway on this series is they should have fucking won last year. Like, last year was the year that they should have won. They were the better team in that series, and that's not just crybaby fan stuff. Like, they were the better team. Bob stole game one, and now after this series, like, they should not have won this series.
No.
The Panthers were clearly better than them this year. And granted, the Panthers were loaded, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why I want to touch this, but people in the chat are saying Carter Hart. At some point, when all that dust gets settled and like whoever is guilty and whoever isn't guilty, that is going to be a fucking shit show, because once these guys are able to work, if they are not guilty, then you are going to see PR nightmares left and right. But like, what do you think is going to happen there? Because if any of these guys are found not guilty, are they suing the league? Are they like what happens with them?
I don't know that answer, and I don't want to go too far down the road of hypotheticals there. But July 24th, they're supposed to be ruling in the case in London. And I would have to think that if the players are exonerated, I mean, then the NHL has to rule whether they can work again or play in the league. And I have no idea at this point if they can. And so that's really the first question that has to be answered. I think Formanton has actually moved on to another. I think he's working as a construction worker. Like, some of those players probably aren't even trying to continue their careers. I think Carter Hart has kept himself in the kind of shape where he could. But I mean, first of all, they have a legal process that's much more important than this. And I guess the what if is if they are found not guilty, then the league's going to have to say whether they can work again for that and not. And I don't even want to guess how that will land, because there's not any precedent for it that I can lean on to even say, like, this is what I think will happen.
And there's no way any of these teams are like considering these players right now, because they have to assume the very possible likelihood they won't be exonerated, and that they can't be seeing these guys as like potential free agents while we don't even know if they'll be like where they'll be in a month.
Yeah.
Exactly. They can't be part of your plans. I mean, I'm sure there's been internal discussions. Hey, if would we ever do it? I don't even know how many teams would do it, honestly. And I'm not trying to weigh in morally on anything. Like, I don't know what's going to happen there. It's going to be tough.
And with anybody with legal issues, with anything, like, I know they say this in the NFL, where if they're on like the top third of your roster, then you have a discussion. if they're in the middle third of your roster, you probably don't want to do it. And if they're on the bottom third of your roster, there's just no way that it's worth it. And again, that becomes a moral conversation, but that's just how these teams work, where they're like, if it's going to help us win, what do we put up with? What do we do, et cetera, et cetera? If it's just like going to be a replacement level player, then there's no need to bring that into the equation. Let's end on a more positive note, I suppose. What's the juiciest thing that you would say on a podcast but not quite report that you've heard the last couple of days?
Oh man, I'm not going into that. I'm good. That's a good way for me to get in trouble.
Because that's what we clip.
I know how it works. Unfortunately, I've been on the wrong end of a few of those. Not with the What Chaos show though, but
there's too many of those Twitter accounts now that listen to a bunch of podcasts and just tweet out like, this person said this without the context. So
there is one in particular that keeps taking me way out of context, and I'm getting pissed off. But you can't win that. You can't. I actually can't remember what it's called. Rumor Report or something.
That's a big one.
Oh, that's is that the one? It's got like it's like a white and burgundy aesthetic.
White and maroon. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I get. So I follow that account, and when I see, because I usually do this when things are aggregated, if I see it, I then go to find where it was. So if it says Chris Johnston said on Spit and Chicklets that this, I'll go and I'll listen to your appearance and I'll make sure that's actually what you said. Because
you're the 1% of the population that does that, though. I mean, most people just read it like that's a fact that I've said it in a declarative manner when often it isn't the case. Anyway, we all got a job to do. That's just part of the business.
All right. You're the best. Thanks, CJ. Appreciate you, man.
Be good.
We all silly like the mayor.